Okay, good morning to everyone. So, this will be an interesting topic for us. So, we have known that technology has been recognized as a critical source of synergy between digital innovation, economic growth, and the environment. The proper application of technological innovation will eventually support the efficient use of natural resources, pollution mitigation, new investment, and growth opportunities. So implementing technology will help the government push corporations to adopt different policies or regulations. Before we start our discussion, I would like to welcome our distinguished speakers. And during our sessions, we will be opening the floor for questions and clarifications that can be directed to our speakers. So to start our discussion, let's understand the primary responsibility of the government in driving policies and initiatives fostering digital innovation and local growth in our country. We can address this first to Mr. David Bonifacio.
Do you mind if I pass it on to Mr. President?
Yes, good morning to everyone. Maybe the question is more appropriate for me because I'm the one coming from the government. But yeah, of course, the Department of Science and Technology where I come from, particularly the Council for Industry, Energy, Technology, Research and Development, of course, champions and promotes digital innovation in the country through, of course, the support for various research, development, and innovation activities. And of course, this is in line with the trust and goal of the government, which is to fully digitally transform as inscribed in its Philippine Development Plan. One of the aspirations essentially is to transform the different processes and functions of government by adopting digital tools, and thereby accordingly also use the same set of digital data derived from that kind of from these processes and functions to actually plan and manage resources and activities so that it will be attuned and more responsive to the needs of the people. So that's how we essentially place the positioning of government with respect to how we prioritize our support for digital transformation.
I guess I can add. My perspective is that a quick background is so we have a fund. It's called DMA Aura. It's a $150 million fund. Well, the current fund's $100 million. The next one that launches in months is $150 million. So as a Filipino, though, we have less than 3% of our fund in it. And so I think one major role the government can play is by creating that environment where it's profitable and safe to invest. So for example, a lot of challenges such as forex, capital gains, infrastructure. So those are things that I think the government can do. I mean, obviously these are distinct times, right, for it to happen. But yeah, so I guess it's more of a wish list versus I don't know. What's the second question?
If I can add, I have a few requests to the government on what they can do. First is, if you see Philippines, we're lagging behind in terms of our startup environment. Right? So I think from that point of view, it already tells something in terms of how do we accelerate our technology industry. Right? One, I'm happy to hear from Sir Eric that we're doing a lot of process simplification in the government. I think the government needs to make it simple, easy for not only technology startup, but also small and medium enterprises to set up their businesses. So I have my own cafe, for example. It took me 6 months just to get a business permit. So it's very, very difficult. Second is, I think David touched a little bit of that, is to be able to provide systematic process on how we can provide seed funding to these small enterprises. Right? We're not getting our fair share of seed funding or startup funding from all the impact investment or investors that is available globally. Third is to have the right infrastructure. How many times have we experienced that we don't have available and reliable network connection. We do get a lot of fiber cuts in our infrastructure. I was in Tawi-Tawi 2 weeks ago. Tawi-Tawi in Bulgao, which is the southmost region in the Philippines or provinces in the Philippines. There's not even a good infrastructure there. You need to go to the Isonet, which is connected to Starlink, to be able to be connected to the rest of the Philippines. The fourth one is and the last one is on capability. Right? Yes, we do have a lot of, we have policies like the Philippine Data Privacy Act, which the government enforces in corporations, but I think we do need to help the normal Filipino to understand what their rights and responsibilities are as part of digital transformation, so that we also level the playing field.
Basically, you need proper government push regulations can achieve many technological advancement, as mentioned by Sir Jay. Thus, there's a need for regulatory policies that can guide what digital innovation is suited for each defined technological solution. So given this, what do you think is the role of technology in driving sustainability and environmental initiatives? Sir, first.
Okay, so maybe maybe in response also to JP's call for greater support for startups. I don't know if you've known that we have supported Startup Grant Fund. We've funded about 30 in the last 2 years. This is under, of course, the ambit of the Innovative Startup Act, which we have started to implement as soon as it was passed into law in 2018. Under that same thrust as well, we have established technology business incubators all over the country. 39 universities, in fact, have availed of this facility to establish their own ecosystem, and we have even banded them together to actually form a network among networks for each of these regions. So hopefully this will provide some kind of start for our startups, and as well as their mentors and the network of partners in the region, especially where you have lots of MSMEs trying to find their way through the digital space. You have a lot of good products, processes and solutions out there, especially those that are available in the regions, or developed by our regional partners that have not seen the light of exposure. So this is where all of this startup support coming into. I cannot speak about the many problems that, I mean, we're just one agency among the 21 departments in the country, but know well that at least the Department of Science and Technology is well with you in clamoring out for greater support for developing the infrastructure. Of course, we ourselves have supported, say, for example, capability building. In the last 3 years or so, we have Project Sparta implemented. Is actually the capacity building program for those that are wanting to get into the data science and analytics space. We aim to train about 30,000 DSP capable specialists that they can service the industry, as well as provide support also to government. Speaking about government services, we even in fact provided grants for those that are wanting to develop solutions, digital solutions for government services. As you know, because the government is in full swing for computerizing, for digitalizing, and now we're wanting them to go into digital transformation, which actually wants to make use of the data that they have captured in all of these humongous computer systems that they have so much put up. But we want to make sense out of this, right? So we want them to actually want government offices, national government agencies, or local government units to actually attune whatever processes, programs, and interventions that they have to be what they call data-driven. So it all starts out by giving them that capability. So we're asking them to partner with their local universities, research and development institutions, in some kind of a system that will allow them to actually have an interface with the data, with the full descriptive analytics, and hopefully to through some kind of digital tools like AI perhaps, come up with some prescriptive analytics, the ones that will actually tell them what to do in light of the trends or patterns that they see in time or in space. So that's actually part of the current efforts that we already have in this space. So as you know, of course, the resources of government is limited, so we need the help from the private sector in moving about some of these key initiatives that we're so far initiating. Thank you.
I think to answer the question and the sustainability, I think so. When I look at information and technology, I'd like to think of it in three buckets. So the first one is IT as solutions. So the question to ask is, what problems for sustainability and the environment, resources, right? What problems do you specifically want to solve versus what initiatives are just is hot or sexy at the moment, right? So for example, a lot of people say, what do you think of AI? And I always ask, what problem are you trying to solve? Right? Or let's say we talk to an AI startup, we ask them, what problem are you trying to solve? And I think that's important, especially in limited resources. Right? The second one is IT as a resource, specifically data. And the question there is, how are you processing the information, data, into insight, into better decision making? And so I think, so for example, the government will have a lot of data. Is it leading to better decision making? Right? Like, is it leading into, or say a company will have a lot of data, is it leading to better decision making? Right? So all of that data is only valuable if it leads to insight that leads to a process or an activity in general management. And then the third one is IT as experience. How is this making the lives of people easier or better across the user journey? Right? So I think to answer that, right, the first thing is to really map out what is that end user journey that we like, and we work backwards. Or what is that problem we want solved? What would this situation look like if it was solved? Then we work backwards. The job of, let's say, investors are to look for the people who have been very systematic, disciplined about creating methodologies to solve those and work backwards. Now, it won't be perfect. Like, the VC hit rates are very low. But the idea there is that over time, it's beat out the users, right? That's it. But I think it's very useful for the different stakeholders in the information technology space to really see what are the solutions, what problems am I solving, what are the insights that I need to be able to pull out from the data, and how is this serving the user journey? So hopefully, like, we're able to implement those things. Because a lot of things we're implementing here aren't, I wouldn't say we're in the leading edge of technology. We wouldn't even be in the leading edge of technology. And so so I think kind of connection to what I said earlier is that what I'm most afraid of, if we don't get our act together, is that the Philippines will be a customer market. It'll be a customer base more than it will be a production leader. Right? And so they're already, like, yesterday I had a meeting with, I serve on the board of a real estate group, and I met with the global CIO, and basically he showed us a demo of what Microsoft is doing with AI. And I was just thinking, like, if I was a BPO owner or CIO of a BPO, if I was working in the BPO or call center, anything that can be like sequenced very like simply, I'd be missing my plan. It's so amazing what the technology is. So I think my biggest concern is that if we don't get it in time, then we run out of time. Right? So I think solve the problems, right? Use the data wisely, and then improve the user journey. Hopefully in time, okay? Because that would be my simple point.
So basically, there are still gaps on how to align with the technological improvements and the data adoptions when it comes to the users having focus in terms of how they accept new technology. So basically, in terms of fueling economic development and fostering innovation, how do you think new products can be done or can be innovated given new business models?
Yeah, maybe also in relation to Rick's question about sustainability, let me just link it up with your last question about having to, look out for new products. And I'd say it's always about having empathy with customers, having empathy with, your clients in the sector which you're revolving in. I know that, of course, ICT and the digital industry is wide and varied and it serves a lot of customers, but it's always important to go back to the customers. Earlier, there was a question about sustainability, and what we're seeing now is that there are a lot of very innovative and actually, I can even say to some extent leading edge projects being pursued by our researchers. They're quite brilliant, they're quite exciting, they're quite promising, but it's not seeing the right market. And that's actually one of the missing gaps that we're trying to address. And this links very much to that support for startups and technology transfer on the part of the government. So do you know that I think at least 1/3 now of our grant system go to technology transfer? Because we realized in the past 2 years that we've been supporting a lot of projects being done by the universities and research and development institutions. Very, very few of them actually are going to the market. Meaning that you can see them on shelves or you can see them in digital stores. So what we're trying to push now is for startups to actually adapt some of these technologies that are coming out of universities and eventually spin off these product solutions or business models so that it can actually serve the market. It's commercialization, but commercialization is not really a bad thing. In fact, it will drive our economy moving forward. So that's actually what will spell both the aspects of sustainability and also serve, also seeing that opportunity to serve the greater market or the greater good. In the UST, recently we've come up with a battle cry, and that is to actually to provide innovations or solutions and to open up opportunities through our initiatives in science, technology, and innovation.
Just to continue on the story of Sir Jericho, empathy and consumer engagement. So I'll give you 2 examples from FMCG or the dairy industry. So one is in China, where we previously had a one-child policy. So mothers really like to give the best thing, best dairy, best nutrition to their children, or to their child, because it's only one. So in dairy, in China particularly, it was very important for us to develop a way to be transparent with the parents. It means being able to trace where their milk is coming from. So a very simple digitization that we've done is we've created an app where they can scan our Friso can. Friso is our milk in China. And then they can see from when or where the milk was harvested, which farm in Netherlands was it harvested, when was it manufactured, when was it shipped to China. That gives them the confidence that they're giving the best and the fresh dairy to their children. This allows us also to get better consumer insights and engage our moms in China. That's first model of how we're changing our engagement with the moms in China. The second is in FMCG, we depend so much with distributors to bring our products closer to our consumers. Again, in FMCG, we've been trying to do this retail self-ordering, where we've been trying to convert sari-sari store owners to do orders without having a salesman visit them. Because the distributor model is quite expensive. And also it takes a lot of time. Right? In the past 10 years, maybe 15 years, we've been trying to do this starting with SMS, Symbian OS, then we had Android, which became better. But none of the FMCG has really been successful in driving this simplification in terms of the supply chain. Until recently, during COVID, we were again forced to rethink how do we engage with our sari-sari stores because we cannot visit them. Right? Because there are so many lockdowns that are happening, localized lockdown, and for the distributors, also for the salesmen, they cannot come to the office. So we've again re-implemented what we call retail self-ordering across the region. But we've been most successful in China again. But why? Because in China, the mindset is these tools are not just technology that the IT function is implementing. These are new business models that we're going to invest in. These are new business models that we would invest in terms of campaigns, promotions, and we will really put money into. Right? Now, our retail sales ordering in China is already 30% of our business there. Right? Whereas in the rest of Southeast Asia, it remains to be less than 1%. So that's how we should think about digital transformation in terms of innovating new business models. That these are not just technologies that we are putting out there and we assume that people will leverage. We should really be investing as part of our business strategies.
Actually, that's a good thing, especially when it comes to the technological advancement, how it's going to be driven by military with adoption, and how the government supports it, even the whole sector. So, given these factors, how are the digital technologies disrupting traditional industries and driving innovation?
I think there's enough examples of the one that's used a lot in the startup space before was the ice cutters. I don't know if you guys whoever's seen Frozen, the Disney movie. Oh, one of those. Right? But basically, the job of the guy was to cut ice and bring it to the city, right? Obviously, that job doesn't really exist anymore for most people, unless it's like decorative, right? Because you have your freezers, right? You get your ice, and apparently, before when you use ice cutter, like 70% of the inventory was lost, but then it made it to the end consumer. Right? So there are many versions of that, like whaling, right? Get oil. Obviously, that was I think, or even how the Philippines has disrupted. Other countries by being a BPO capital for voice, right? So there's a lot of examples about when it moves here, it disrupts something else. And I think, like the Philippines, like the average Filipino really needs to understand that it's a very competitive space. That like countries compete, you know. So your companies compete, countries compete, and it's really possible that, for example, like I take Grab everywhere, right? And Grab is not a Filipino company. So the number one taxi company in the country will not be Filipino. You know? And so some other countries will have captured that value. Or for example, I saw Asana over there. We use Asana in our company, right? So the number one project management company, product in our company isn't going to be from the Philippines. So I'm paying someone, I think Asana was started by an ex-Facebook guy. I think it was from But all that to say, the more it's coming from a Philippine standpoint, right? I have no issues using foreign software, to be honest, as long as it improves our business rate. But from a Philippine macro standpoint, a lot of the major value will be captured somewhere else. You know, it will be in a data center outside of the Philippines. It will be using technology. They will get the lion's share of value, while we'll get a portion of it. So I think that's where I'm more worried about from a disruptive standpoint, because we may end up like a user base, like I mentioned earlier, more than an innovator. And so that means someone else is driving the disruption. Someone else is driving the agenda, and we just follow it. Not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because it does improve our lives, but just makes us lower in the technology value chain, right? Which is not the best thing in the world either.
Definitely. Actually, it was also mentioned a while ago in terms of the scarcity of telecommunications across the country, especially in the farmland areas. How can you see, sir, the improvement given the agenda mentioned a while ago in terms of improving our telecommunications sector? What will be the roadmap, and how can we, as an end user, benefit in terms of increasing and improving the reliability and bandwidth that we will be having, not only in terms of the consumer side, but as well as the LGUs, even up to the barangays.
Sure. We're starting to see some cases where the basic backbone infrastructure is actually playing a key role in the development of not only the IT infrastructure but the industry as a whole in the farther reaches of the country outside, of course, the centers of urbanization or cities. And I think this is what we want to really see moving forward. I know that pretty much the telco and the IT industry is pretty much devolved, or should I say, commercialized in that sense. But say, for example, we're strongly pushing for key policy developments that will enable the establishment of IT networks in places where telcos were not yet present. This is done through the digital white space bill which we're trying to move forward. This is done through the efficient use of IT bills that we're trying to also champion with our legislators. And these are born out of, did you know that these are actually also born out of the research done by our scientists and engineers, where they have concluded that among others, they can develop the technology, yes, that will enable access, but it is I think the key policies that are still hindering them from actually applying the technologies. Let me give you an example. There's this group of researchers, I think they're even at the senior high school level, which developed a way for them to actually transmit data. This was born out of the COVID-19 condition pandemic that we had. But you know what the restrictions that was placed on them is that they could not transmit their data across reserved bandwidths or channels. So they had to get a special permit from NTC. And you know, the irony is that there was no telco presence in that area as yet. So we were driving home the point that indeed we now need to put in place some kind of policy which will enable these kinds of technologies to flourish in areas where they are actually needed. And we say maybe there are only two things that can be used. One is for digital, how do you say, distance education. Remember the time when kids cannot go to schools, and then because they need to get their modules uploaded, but there's no internet connection. And then number two, so that's one purpose. The second purpose should be during disaster periods. So you can activate actually these network hubs during times of disaster, so you could transmit information that will enable them to quickly respond and hopefully recover. So these are just examples of the kinds of disruptive technologies that we need, but some are wanting or some kind of policy support so that they could actually be used optimally. Thank you.
Maybe this question will be Georgie. So given your experience in terms of the global market as well as the FMCG, how do you think cloud computing enable or affect how we do scalable infrastructures and do analysis of data in terms of providing new products and technologies, or even giving back to our consumers?
So cloud is very much the buzzword 10 years ago. So I'm hoping everyone has now adopted cloud. But I think one thing that I will put more emphasis in adopting cloud is really cybersecurity. We tend to forget, yes, it is exciting to remove all of our infrastructures in our server rooms, reduce our server sizes, and repurpose it for something else. But we need to make sure that we're ready in terms of having the right capability from our teams to understand the right configurations for using cloud securely, but also when we get attacks, that our teams are ready also to handle crisis and recover our situation. So I think cloud it's a no-brainer that we have to use today because it's more efficient in most situations. There will still be conditions that we need our own servers, right? Because of privacy, confidentiality, for whatever reasons that we need to properly assess. But again, cybersecurity, I think, is a topic that we need to be discussing and be associated with.
Definitely. But in terms of quantum computing, first Sir and or Mr. So David, how do you view the power of quantum computing in terms of giving more accurate information, even provides adequate details on how to move forward?
Well, we do have the beginnings of the quantum computing initiatives here in the Philippines. We've drawn the roadmap. We've started to support some initial projects to at least give them a little bit of excitement. This welcome news actually for those that are already in this field. Quantum communications was the starting point. They've now started to dabble with quantum computing and have actually gone into collaboration with various firms that offer this kind of capability. I think it is in the software space that we're trying to, putting in our focus on in the quantum computing game, and that is because we don't have to spend as much in the infrastructure. We don't have to build a quantum computer, which is a cryogenic facility actually. But there is much opportunity in developing the initial software hardware interface, the computing algorithms that will come with it. As you know, of course, computing using qubits is quite a different paradigm from the usual way we regard computing right now. And I think we started this project about 2 years ago, and we're about to also close in some collaborative research, because I think this is at the leading edge of research, and we need to actually collaborate with those that are ahead of the game, those that are into this space, in order for us to somehow be in it for a while. We're just so happy to see that there are actually Filipinos that are working in this space in various capacities all over the world, about 4 or 5 that we've already counted, and it seems that these are like the avenues of support and assistance that we could see in at least the quantum computing space. The initial application that was doubled on in that initial project was something to do with circuitry of quantum computing, and I think it's if it pans out, we're seeing like maybe 5 to 10 years before we could actually see a working quantum computing facility in place. So about the time that it comes out, we should be ready to come up with competent, with at least conversant computing scientists and engineers at least from the Filipino standpoint. Thank you.
I think the way we'll answer is basically going to be the same answer for anything, like whether it's AI or cloud. And so what I like to tell our CIOs, right, is of the companies that we invest in, right, is number one is to be, like in a time when there's a lot of change, that I want you to focus on the timeless things. Where, like, what's timeless about your business? And focus the technology on being strong in those things, versus you're always about the next shiny object, right? That's a quick way to lose money, right? And then the second thing is that, and I learned this as a young man, right? Like, the sexier something is, the more you should be cautious. And so like, whether it's a new business opportunity, a human being, right? Like the technology, or a new movie, like the sexier it is, the more you should be cautious, right? And I think the reason for that is because then your judgment isn't objective, right? Versus it's like, okay, I'm looking for solutions, I'm looking for insights, I'm looking for better experience, right? And then so figure out how that technology delivers those, and then you work backwards from that, right? Don't say, oh, AI tomorrow, you get that a lot, right? Like, how are you using AI? I'm like, how about we figure out something more basic first that matters to people 100% of the time? And I love AI, I subscribe to it and I use it every day, so I think it's awesome. But having said that, it's like, focus on the timeless things. What are the things your customers find most meaningful, right? What are the things to solve? What are the insights to draw? What are the experience to improve on? Okay? And then be very cautious about like sexy technology, especially for the buzzword. Even for investors, we tend to be extra cautious because usually we find that the valuations are nuts just because there's an AI at the end, right? Or because at the time there's a cloud at the end, right? And so I think every time we see it as a buzzword, we're extra cautious. Yeah.
Ferdinand. So as technology professionals, I think we're excited with what David said, with all the new toys that we're getting, all the new buzzwords. But so as I said earlier, cloud was the buzzword maybe 10, 15 years ago. Data or business intelligence was a buzzword 10 years ago. Then blockchain was there 5 years ago. Then now AI. Right? But how many of you have really been adopting blockchain? No hands. Right. So to David's point, yeah, on the practical side, unless you're in a high-tech company, right, then you need to be at speed with all of these technological changes. But if you're in FMCG or in other industries, I think on the practical side, yes, you need to be cautious with all of these capabilities. Maybe this is what you don't need this right now. You probably think you need a Ferrari because you just need a Toyota. And that's enough for what you need to do as a function. But also invest on learning what these are. So have a small team, build the capability, let them experiment, let them learn fast but also feel cheap, right? So that you know how to best use of these capabilities for your company. That's the only way that you will learn whether these are applicable or not applicable for your strategies.
So at this point, we will be opening the floor for questions and clarifications that the education has or directed towards our speakers. Anyone from the floor wants to ask, clarify? Morning. You could state your name first. Organization.
I'm Jigal from Vijay Semiconductor Manufacturing. So I was in automation and analysis. So the question is, we technology people are rushing things because there were lots of technologies now. But the question is, are we really getting a guarantee from our end users when it comes to utilizing our tools? Right? Because, for example, if there are poor communities from China, they don't have knowledge about digitalization, automation, technology, etc. So they end up not using it. Rich people, elite people, or average people like us, we have the capability, we have the knowledge in understanding things, utilizing it.
That's right.
But going back to the poor people, they don't have knowledge already. They have business, small business, but they don't know about technology, so they just throw the idea. On the other hand, however, poor people doesn't have to be intelligent. Some of them are smart and they use the technology in scamming people. So are we doing technology for good reasons or for bad reasons? So going back to my first question, are we rushing things? Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I mean, I can take a stab. So I think, interesting question. I think one is, so the question fundamentally is, like, are we going too fast, right? And so the question is, what's the right speed? I think the right speed will be different per person, per company, country, but at the same time, we have to remember that there is a competition, right? So So for example, let's say for our businesses, businesses are worried about losing money, right? And one way you lose money is maybe you overspend in technology because you're rushing, right? That means you're going too fast, right? Or you're underspending and you're becoming obsolete, and your competition is able to deliver the product, has better margins, better insight on it, and then so you're going too slow. That's the case, right? Now, in terms of, let's say, like for the different like demographics, right? It's really a complex question. Sorry. Parang pala naman like fish show.
Alright, so maybe we could just wrap it up quickly.
So basically, our key takeaways here is that the need to experience and learn to adopt is needed to maximize technology solutions that are already available, which can help achieve business, individual, and environmental sustainability. So the different digital technologies and initiatives are expected to evolve further, while commercial deployment will increase the demand for reliable, secure, and sustainable implementation. So basically, that wraps up our session for today. Thank you very much for our speakers.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a big round of applause.